Two more emails I want to read before we shift gears. First is from Vishal. He says, why shouldn't Apple charge whatever they want for their IP? They don't have 100% market share over app platforms. If Spotify or others don't like paying 30%, they can sign people up on other platforms. I don't understand why this is an issue. So I could answer this, Ben, but I get the sense
No,
you
you do. You
wrestle
answer
with
it.
this.
No,
Well,
I'm curious your answer.
I mean, first of all, my answer would be that Apple can and will charge whatever they want in the App Store, and Apple's probably going to continue charging 30% fees on in-app purchases, and none of this will really change until Congress intervenes because in-app purchases is still going to be a massive business. And the reason Congress should intervene on the 30% fee and the reason there should be a ban on Apple's anti-steering provisions is that over time, the economy will produce better outcomes for more people if everyone who wants to run some kind of business on a mobile phone isn't paying a 30% tax to Apple or Google.
So are you saying those as two separate things? The in-app purchase and anti-steering, because those are two distinct questions.
Things, yes. And I think the in-app purchases are now being overlooked as everyone says, all right, no more anti-steering, it's all good, this is a whole new era. I think the in-app purchases are still going to be an issue going forward unless Congress addresses that issue. But perhaps we'll cross that bridge in a couple years. I just think I understand.
Well, no, we're going to cross that bridge in this podcast right now. Let me warn you.
Well, and I understand where Vishal is coming from. Like, Apple has a right to capitalize on having a great product, and Apple has capitalized on having a great product. But I would say adhering to that principle starts to look ridiculous when you're then defending Apple's right to collect perpetual taxes on millions of digital businesses who just have no practical alternative but to pay Apple merely for the right to exist. What do you think?
So I have a few responses. I'm going to start by responding to you, and then I'll respond to Vishal.
Okay.
My response to you is the reason the reason I called out that distinction is, to your point, which you acknowledged, you should be able to harvest the benefits of your creation, right? Mm-hmm. So we agree on that at a high level. I think, by and large, the user experience of in-app purchase is a great thing that Apple created and should be able to benefit from. This, like, it's a perfectly, we can accomplish our goals by letting apps go out to the web. That's what they control. Why do they get access to Apple's infrastructure? The issue with the steering thing is this Apple, it's not a free speech argument, but it's like philosophically a free speech thing. They're not letting developers talk to their users, because it just goes. This is Apple's problem, is setting aside all the legal stuff. This specific aspect is so gross. It just kind of disgusts everyone, including me. And my view is it a little clunkier to go out to a web page and have to make sure you're signed in? And again, tokenization helps fix this, but do a purchase, then go back to your app is a little clunkier. It absolutely is. Guess what? Apple gets to have a better experience because they created the better experience. I have a much more difficult time, and in fact, pretty strenuously object to developers having a right to Apple's integrated purchase when they can do their own purchase on their own website. If you want to use Apple's purchase flow, Apple gets to have a take. And I think that's totally reasonable. And I think you are going too far to say it's not just that you get to collect payments from users without giving money to Apple. You also have not just a right to communicate to users, which I think is fine. You have a right to Apple's creations to do so. So I would just disagree with you, number one.
That's fair. And I will just add that Apple and the anti-steering provision, I'm only a couple episodes into Andor season 2, but it's real imperial behavior from Apple trying to collect fees from external websites, days on from the initial link click. But yeah, I actually agree that in-app purchase is a wonderful customer experience. And that's one of the reasons I'm confident that this issue isn't going to go away, because a lot of people are just going to prefer.
Yeah, but now we're getting to entitlement. I get why do developers have an entitlement to a better experience. They can own websites. This is where I actually agree with Vishal that they could make their own platform with the beautiful, smooth experience. They want access to Apple's platform. Now,
to seamless, frictionless purchases. Yes. I just think the rates are super competitive.
Well, let's talk about the rates. What's interesting about the rates is I can spin an argument for why the rates should be 99% and an argument for why the rates should be 0%.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends how you look at it. So the 99% is what I wrote in this article. The reality is that people want apps on their phones. The phones are the most important devices to them. Apple controls that. And because that Apple, it's like Facebook in their advertising, right? If Facebook finds you a customer you're never going to have found otherwise, what's the limit on what they can charge for that? Every cent that you make is additive, right? Now, it's not quite the case with apps but imagine like because you could go otherwise, so it's not a perfect scenario, but by and large, and this was the point of the article, the power of owning all the users on a platform that is essential is you can do what you want and developers will abide by it. They'll complain, but they'll abide by it because that's how powerful platforms are. So that's the argument for the one side. The argument for the opposite side, why it would be 0, is that suppose Apple were not allowed to charge anything for its intellectual property, the market clearing price would be 0. Mm-hmm. They would still offer it because it's so important to have apps collectively. Even if you have power over any one individual app, having apps is such an essential ingredient for a platform that if Apple were forced to, they would still make APIs and documentation and all these sorts of things they would be like Windows back in the day. And it's funny, everyone points to Windows as, see, that's how you should do it. Honestly, if anyone knows anything about Windows, I think it's probably the case they just didn't think of being able to charge this much, or was it possible in a world when you bought applications discs on CD-ROMs or right or discs, back in the day. And so the reality is the market clearing price is 0. So this is my whole problem. This is the fundamental logical flaw in the judge's case. She's just asserting it's super competitive based on nothing. Because the answer is actually the correct rate is either 99.9 or 0. Any point in between is arbitrary. 30% is arbitrary. She's mad at Apple doing a post hoc valuation of their IP. Any valuation is post hoc because it's just that's just there's some aspect of this decision that is not in touch with reality that speaks to the lack of an appropriate law in this case. This is my point all along. The laws we have don't address this as clearly as they could. That's why I concluded by saying, look, it's actually pretty straightforward. If you have a platform, and I think you can divide a platform pretty tightly, you have a high number, which means it's consumer, it's not enterprise, because the enterprise, it's a much more sophisticated buyers and users and much more viable to do other things. If you have a platform, you bring 2 fundamental American truisms, and I threw in this extra one along the way. The platform doesn't get to interfere with your commerce, and they don't get to interfere with your speech. Who can be opposed to that, right? Apple doesn't get to kick apps off because of what content they have or don't have, and Apple doesn't get to kick apps off because what they do on their websites between 2 consenting adults, right? So
you may run into some issues with have traditionally not been fans of adult.
No, there's a case with the judge's opinion. She's 100% morally right, but it's kind of legal nonsense and economic nonsense. You just stated blindly it's super competitive. Super competitive based on what?
Well, based on if there were other app stores available, they wouldn't be charging 30%. And also, I think that the rational economic outcome, like Spotify, for instance, ultimately, this is a redistribution of wealth from Apple to Spotify. But Spotify is the one who is providing the value to users. Apple is not providing 30% of value to users. I
completely agree. Just to be super clear, I feel like it's so important when I say it again and again because there's such emotional resonance to this bit, particularly amongst developers. I completely agree. I've been objecting to this for years and years and years. I hope my stripes in this case are sort of well established. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, Spotify is not going to pull their app from Apple, say, actually Spotify's only available on Android, or we're going to build our own Spotify phone. So that's how we're going to compete. Not going
No,
to like,
and that's fair. I only raise that to say that that would be my response if a judge asked me, so is this super competitive? And we're saying
Supra.
Supra, not
Yeah,
super.
Supra. Yes. Well, you just
But
said super, but
I would I would invoke it. Yes, I need to enunciate better. Well, but yes, I that's what I would invoke. And ultimately, I think this is not the optimal economic arrangement. But Apple is a platform, makes great products, and is able to dictate terms in perpetuity until Congress intervenes.
yeah. Well, and by the way, the judge's solution is the solution. It allow links out to the web. Like the problem is, again, I think it's gonna. Apple did file their both an appeal and ask for a stay. We'll see what happens. I think, again, I'm not gonna. I think 50-50 chance, maybe 55-45 to actually win.
Mm-hmm.
But if they win, or even if they don't win, I think a law here is actually. I'm not one to call for laws. I'm not one to call for regulations. There's aspects of the DMA that do get at this. The DMA is just, it's way too complicated and way too in depth, and it tries to police too many things. Like the fact of the matter, everything is a trade-off. I am someone that is hesitant about regulation. I want to open up for innovation, but there's a bit where like infrastructure is important, and platforms are infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, if we want innovation, if we want creative outcomes, then sorry, Apple, congratulations on your success. You've made a lot of money. I, again, completely disagree with you that you should be forced to open up anything on your phone that you don't want to, including in-app purchase. But the idea you can police what developers say as a price to be on an essential platform is bad economically. It's fundamentally un-American.
Yep. There you go. Well, and as you noted on Wednesday night, Mark Gurman reported that Apple has filed a motion for a pause on last week's ruling on the App Store, that it must stop collecting payments made on the outside web. And so this journey is going to continue for years to come. Good news for everybody. We're never going to stop talking about the App Store here on Sharp Tech. But